thought you were forbidden to teach your podcast science to the natives until we join the Patreon.
Not forbidden. It's not done. I'll do it, though, if you like. And if I can. I'm no podcast producer. Actually, I am. I could teach you, but join that Patreon.
Yeah, please.
Welcome to Science Fiction Book Club, a podcast for bookworms and stargazers. In every episode, we dive into the pages of our favorite science fiction novels to break down the big ideas, ask the nerdy questions, and maybe learn a bit about ourselves along the way. My name's Abu, and as always, I'm joined by my Gobrin ice crossing partner, Obssa.
Such a pleasure to be with you on this 700-mile trek.
Truly. Well, we are going to be backtracking for 100 of those miles. I hope you're ready.
Only appropriate.
All right, folks. As the title indicates, today we are here to cover the final chapters of The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Guin. We have been thoroughly enjoying this book, and I, for one, am very excited to wrap things up and talk about it. But before we get into it, how about we knock out some housekeeping first?
As Boo just said, we're covering the entirety of this book, and of course, in particular, chapters 16 through 20 for this episode. So, of course, please have read the book.
Yes.
It would be silly if you hadn't. And of course, we encourage you to read along with us, share your thoughts, email us at sci-fi bookclubpod@loreparty.com, to join our Patreon at patreon.com/sci-fi bookclubpod. We post free reading guides, discussion questions, all the bonus clips and bloopers you could hope to find on that Patreon. And it's also, of course, where you can join our Discord, where we like to keep these nerdy sci-fi discussions going with fellow readers just like you.
That's right. And all of those links are in the show notes. So please check them out after you're done listening. In particular, I will say I'm very proud of the new website that I just revamped and launched for the show.
As you should be, Abu. Incredible.
So check that link out in the description. The website has a beautiful schedule page that is dynamically updated, folks, with all of our previous books and all of the future books that we will cover. So bookmark that page. That is the best way for you to keep up with the reading assignments.
That's right.
Okay, with that all out of the way, folks, you all know the game plan for these book club episodes. We will begin by summarizing the assigned chapters for today's reading. Then we'll share our feelings and impressions at this point of the whole book, since we've completed it. And finally, later in the episode, we will dive deep in our sci-fi analyses and each share a thematic takeaway that we want to break down further. But before we get into all of that, folks, let's take a quick break. Let's gather up all of our ice trekking gear. Stick around after the break. We are finishing up this book.
Girl, winter is so last season. And now spring's got you looking at pictures of tank tops with hungry eyes. Your algorithm is feeding you cutoffs. You're thirsty for the sun on your shoulders. That perfect hang on the patio sundress. Those sandals you can wear all day and all night. And you've had enough of shopping from your couch. Done hoping it looks anything like the picture when you tear open that envelope? It's time for a little in-person spring treat. It's time for a trip to Ross. Work your magic.
With Plan B emergency contraception, we're in control of our future. It's backup birth control you take after unprotected sex that helps prevent pregnancy before it starts. It works by temporarily delaying ovulation, and it won't impact your future fertility. Plan B is available in all 50 U.S. states at all major retailers near you, with no ID, prescription, or age requirement needed. Together, we've got this. Follow Plan B on Insta at Plan B One Step to learn more. Use as directed.
All right, welcome back. Let's begin with a brief summary, starting with chapter 16. This is another chapter that's framed as one of Esther Rand's journal entries. He catalogs their grueling journey through the Gobrin ice, taking note of the weather, the snow, and the mileage that he and Genli have covered. And he does so in considerable detail, as we'll recall.
Yes.
Which is fascinating to pay attention to what he covers in great detail versus in less detail.
Yeah, more on that later.
That's right. As Esther Rand explains, his journal is intended for his people in Estra, who will incorporate them into the records of the domain. Their journey is immediately thrown off course as they have to double back west to find a passage through an ice pass between two volcanoes. The going is slow and brutal, but they persevere.
Right.
Finally, on the 23rd day of their journey, they make it to the Gobern Ice. Now the actual trek begins.
This was 23 days of getting to the fucking ice.
That's right. Oh, incredible. And yes, so they begin and they're making good progress. They're staying up late, just chatting after dinners.
Yeah.
And it's during one of those chats that they talk about the male and female sex. And Genli is incredibly, completely unable to describe a woman to Estarad. More about that later.
Certainly. Lots more about that later. Okay, let's move on to chapter 17. This is another one of those mythological interlude chapters that have been spread throughout this entire book. This one shares a truly wild and unhinged creation myth of the Argoda.
Agreed.
I'm going to try to explain this in a way that makes sense, but truly, it's hard to explain. In short, this myth from the Argoda says that at the beginning of the world, there was nothing but ice and sun. These godlike beings that take the form of ice shapes eventually climbed out of these great crevasses in the ice and began to shape the world as we know it today, creating the seas and the soil and the creatures that inhabit Gethin. Before these godlike ice creatures melted away, they also created 39 men who awoke when they drank the milkier remains of these gods once they melted away. The first of these men to awaken was named Endondaroth, and in his fear and shock, he quickly killed 37 of his fellow men. This unhinged guy went on to then create a house of the frozen bodies of the 37 that he killed while he waited for his last surviving brother, the 38th one, to someday return. Eventually, Endondaroth enters Kemer, and his brother returns to the house, and the two pair up. And the myth goes on to say that all humans are thus created from the pairing of these two original men created by the gods. And thus, all humans carry within them both darkness and light, inherited from the gods, inherited from these first men. A lot of Greek mythology vibes here, for sure.
Yeah, totally. Moving on to chapter 18, we return to Genli's perspective as our intrepid travelers make their daring crossing across the Gobern Ice. And we get some pretty interesting duality from this chapter. The trek is absolutely awful for Genli in many ways. He's constantly hungry, he's tired, he's cold, and Estravan is probably experiencing a lot of the same, but he is steadfast and methodical. Yeah. And Genli at times looks at him with the sort of murderous hatred in him, but really directed as much to Gethin as to anything else, and the winter that they're having to endure. And despite all this, as Genli looks back from the future, he looks upon it as a time and a source of great joy, actually.
Wow. Yeah.
Which is really fascinating to kind of see how that perspective eventually does develop in him from what is otherwise pretty miserable time.
Right.
And during their many days on the ice, Genli also begins to teach Esteran mind speech. And we get some really fun world building about telepathy and the untapped ability in most humans across most planets to use it. Esteran does actually learn it, but it's a pretty horrible experience that first time where he hears the voice of his dead brother, Eric, speaking Genli's thoughts.
Yeah.
He's frightened, and like shoots up in bed and thinks that his dead brother has spoken to him.
Talking to him right from the beyond or something. Yeah, I'm sure that must be horrifying.
Pretty traumatic. There's also some brilliant writing here from Le Guin, where we get Genly's perspective on that same night of Kemmer that Estervan had briefly journaled about.
Yeah.
And we see just how much more emotionally loaded it was for him.
Yeah.
Genly also, in his recollection, completely just passes over his utter inability to explain women.
Yeah. Oh my God.
And just
so
kind
funny.
of hand waves it as being an awkward time between the two of them.
Anyway, we talked about gender and stuff. It's whatever.
That's right. That's right. Oh, Genly. And yes, finally, with their food rations and strengths running dangerously low, they're approaching day 61. They spot the Escher-Hoth Crags, marking the edge of Karhaidish territory, and finally begin to turn south.
Wow, we're almost there, folks. Except, psych, there's so many more days of traveling left to go.
That's right.
Chapter 19 begins with more grueling days of travel as the two of them continue to weaken and as their rations continue to run out. At this point, Estervan is basically starving himself so that Genly can have something to eat.
Right.
But ultimately, after an arduous 81-day journey, they make it to a village on the Karhide border, and they are welcomed in the Karhaidish way with food and shelter and open arms.
Right.
Once they're recovered, they make plans to travel further south to Sasanoth, which is along that disputed Sinoth Valley that we've been hearing about all book. And they're going to go there because Sasanoth is the closest place that has a strong enough radio transmitter for Genly to send a message. Once they arrive in Sasanoth, things kind of go horribly wrong. Genly is able to shoot off that transmission to his allies in space in that ship that's orbiting the planet, but Estervan is betrayed by this old friend of his, and the two of them make a frantic run for the Ergoda border before the authorities can catch up. Eventually, they try to cross the border, but in a tragic scene that absolutely broke my heart, Estervan is gunned down before he can make the crossing. And he dies tragically in Genly's arms as the authorities arrest Genly.
So horrible.
Horrible.
And we finally come upon the final chapter of the book, chapter 20, where a devastated Genly is taken to Erenrong, and he is met with all honors. He's taken to the castle and given essentially a cabin that's really close to the king's place. And he makes final plans for the ship's arrival and his second attendance with the king.
Right.
This meeting with the king is remarkably different from the last, as a much more confident Genly firmly and politely explains everything to a now somewhat more elderly, weakened Argivan,
Right.
who is more receptive to his message than he was the first time around, let's say.
Yeah. And at this point, his hands are sort of tied, right? The ship is already on its way down.
Yeah.
And Genly has magically arrived from across the border. He's brought shame to Ergoda. I really liked how in this chapter, everyone is treating Genly as if he's achieved like S-tier Shiftgrether, right?
Right.
They're like, no one can top your Shiftgrether, my guy.
Yes, totally.
This is incredible. Totally. And even the king has to bow his head to what Genly has achieved here. The king doesn't really have a choice to deny Genly at this point.
Totally. And we say what Genly has achieved, but Truthfully, what Estervan has achieved,
absolutely, absolutely,
and also perfectly predicted. Which, just goes to say what a kind of insightful, intelligent, shrewd person Estervan was.
Truly.
And it is here where the book largely concludes. Genly's allies arrive, and they begin their work of integrating the Gathenian nations into the Ecumen. And a few months later, Genly ends up visiting Estervan's family in Kermland to deliver the journals of his late friend and to relay some of the tale of their journey.
A beautiful note to end on.
There we have it.
There we have it. That's The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. Oh my goodness. Okay, here's the portion of the episode where we heap praise on this book, as we have done for the past 2 episodes. But
That's right.
I guess here we go. Dare I ask, Obssa, how are you feeling? What did you think of this book and of these chapters in particular?
Yeah. I mean, at this point, this is entirely a rhetorical question.
Yeah, truly.
I think at this point, the listeners could write out our thoughts for us.
For sure.
Obviously, loved this book.
Yes!
Absolutely loved it. I'll save my final review for the end, but safe to say, this is landing as one of my favorite books. I mean, of all time.
Yeah,
simply
truly.
Just so many threads to follow here. Le Guin's background in anthropology reads through on every single page. It's kaleidoscopic. There are moments you could almost endlessly stare into and explore. Things that, would otherwise be throwaway lines in another book feel like so rich, and that you could almost expand on any single anecdote and write a whole story just around those. I found the ending such a satisfying conclusion, partially because, and I'll have more to say about this later, but partially because it almost felt less like an ending so much as the opening of a new chapter, a new book, which is, I don't know, just it's so fascinating and really goes to show that Le Guin's writing is so multifaceted and layered and just brilliant. And of course, also Genli, our favorite buffoon, finally starts to actually understand the people of Geffen, even though it takes the entire journey and the death of the only person who trusted him for him to achieve it. But no, I mean, just so much that I could say about this book, but would love to hear your take as well before we continue to gush on.
Yeah, sure. Look, here's the thing. I hesitate to call this a perfect book. I do not believe in total perfection, but I am also hard-pressed to find any faults in this book. Yeah. I loved every page of this damn book. What a masterpiece.
Totally.
I'm so glad that we selected it for this season. I'm so glad that we read it together. I think our conversations only enhanced my love and appreciation of this book. Also, in sort of a broader sense, I'm just glad that a piece of writing like this exists.
Totally.
In human culture, in history, it's been written down and preserved and passed on. I hope many generations to come continue to read this story and really sink their teeth into it. This is why I love books and storytelling and science fiction. This is the type of thing that it feels so special to me, this type of book. Like we said, we'll share our final ratings of the book later, but what I'll say now is that I would recommend this book to basically anyone, almost everyone. I recognize that the beginning is very confusing and very dense.
For sure. Yeah.
Many fantasy and sci-fi books can be like that in those first 50, 100 pages. But I do think, unlike other books that can continue to be confusing and dense for too long, you quickly get a grasp of this world because Le Guin is such an elegant writer, and then you're just kind of along for an incredible story.
Yes.
And, I can't stop thinking about how you put it back in our first episode coverage of this book. You said that this world feels like Le Guin built it from the inside out rather than the outside in. A lot of world building can feel like sort of Dungeons and Dragons storytelling. You're the dungeon master, you're the godlike being, and looking in on this world from the outside, from above. You're an observer. And a lot of the characters can weirdly feel like that too. This is a world that just feels inhabited. Estervin is part of Gethin. Gethin is a whole society. It's so easy to just believe this world exists.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that type of world building is actually pretty unique. Not every person out there can world build like that.
I agree.
And Le Guin does it masterfully here.
Totally.
I loved it. To wrap up my thoughts, I did want to zoom in a little bit on these chapters. What are my thoughts on the third act in particular? Obviously, I loved it. Again, I'm really stretching to find any criticisms of this book. I guess I could be a bit nitpicky and say that the third act is paced quite slower than the other acts. You know, like we spend a long time just like traveling on the ice and describing a lot of weather patterns and geological features and how cold it is and how arduous it is. A lot of these final few chapters is basically just that until they finally get back to Carhide.
Yeah.
But honestly, like, I don't know that bothered me all that much because Le Guin writes it all so beautifully and weaves in a lot of incredible emotional beats between Estraven and Genly in between all of the we're just crossing the ice stuff.
Totally.
And so the slow pace of it didn't bother me at all, really.
Yeah. And can I just add to that? You know, I think there's a little bit of kind of deliberateness in Le Guin's part, you know, in that we're meant to feel the length of their journey as well, you know.
And that's 700 miles.
That's 700 miles, and it's not pleasant, you know. This is not, yes, I mean, Genly might look back upon it with joy, but he certainly wasn't joyous in the moment. And I think, we're also sort of forced to contend with that. And with the third character of it all, the antagonist, that is Gethin, you know?
Yeah.
So I agree. It is, the pacing is challenging, but I think, you know, somewhat intentionally.
Yeah. The glacial pacing of the third act, very much intentional.
Yeah.
But I think, you know, again, all of these emotional beats culminate in Estraven's heartbreaking death.
Right.
Which, to be fair, wasn't like wholly unexpected. I think there were a lot of red flags, especially in Act 2, that were basically hinting that Estraven is not going to make it through the end of the story.
Yeah.
But it still hurt, you know. I'm still going to miss him.
Totally.
And, you know, like you said earlier, I too am totally satisfied with the end of this book. It feels like closing one chapter and opening the start of a new book, this is the new Gethin 2.0.
Right.
And I think that's handled beautifully by Le Guin. So I loved it. I loved this book cover to cover.
Yeah. I think one final thought I'll kind of wrap up my impressions with is just kind of concerning, you know, obviously my deep dive last time was about the relationship between Estraven and Genly and how it evolves over the course of their, how it evolves over the course of this book.
Yeah.
And one thing that hadn't really clicked for me until I read it in the afterword. And I don't know if, you know, everyone's edition had the same afterword, but mine did. And I found it to be really fascinating and interesting and informative. But they said kind of explicitly that Genly is a misogynist. And that's like, as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, yes.
Right.
Yes. I mean, completely. And, you know, the moment that we kind of joke about is the one where Estraven asks him to describe the differences between men and women, to describe women. And he kind of just stammers. And the first thing out of his mouth is something like, you know, there aren't many women scientists or great thinkers. And he's just kind of like hemming and hawing. And then throughout the book, anytime he's being kind of unkind or harsh about the people of Gethin, he's reaching for feminine descriptors.
Yes.
You know, he describes King Argivan's voice as shrill. He describes his like landlady's fat ass. And, I mean, it's you know, I don't know. Once you see it, you kind of can't unsee it.
Totally.
But it does make me, I don't know. I mean, given his evolution over the course of the book and kind of where he lands at the end, I do appreciate him more as a character. Not to say that I particularly like him, to be fair, but I do. I don't know. I think there's a reason that he was chosen to go to Gethin, and I think it's perhaps that, you know, he and perhaps the people of the Ecumen would need to kind of cross this divide before the people of Gethin could really be a part of the Ecumen. You know, if the people of the Ecumen couldn't accept what, you know, at least for Genli was something that he was extremely prejudiced against, then it's not a question of whether Gethin is ready to join the Ecumen, it's whether the Ecumen are ready for Gethin to join them.
So true, yes.
So I found the book and this like last section pretty satisfying in that regard as well, that we get kind of a, some closure around Genli and Estervan's relationship. Unfortunate closure in that Estervan dies, but,
right.
But also we get some pretty remarkable transformations in Genli as well.
Yeah, that's a really great point. Yeah, Genli's evolution in this book is, I think, one of the most satisfying parts. I really liked at the end when his Ecumen allies came off the ship, he was kind of like, ew, you guys are all so gendered.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Right. Yeah, totally.
Like, that's an interesting reaction from somebody who has been
Absolutely.
so stuck in the gender norm mindset.
Totally. Yes.
And that is a very interesting, like, are we saying Genli has gone woke and is no longer misogynist? Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah.
He still has much to learn, but he's already learned so much over the course of this story. That's deeply satisfying as a reader.
Totally.
All right, so that's the chapter summaries and our feelings of the book. Clearly, we loved it so much. Let's take another quick break, but stick around because up next, we're going to get into our sci-fi analysis, and we both brought a takeaway to the table that we want to dive into. We want to dive a little bit deeper into the amazing themes of this story. So that's all coming up in just a minute. We'll see you soon.
Okay, welcome back, listeners. Let's jump right into our deep dive. And Abu, you've got a pretty brilliant one I am excited to hear about. Why don't you kick us off?
Okay, so for my takeaway today, I want to examine a theme that I think is truly at the heart of this book. It's one of the core pillars that holds up this story. I want to take a look at how Le Guin shows us the path to bridging two cultures. She lays out over the course of this entire book what it takes and how challenging it can be. I think Genli and Estervan's entire character arcs and their entire emotional journeys in this story are basically a stand-in for Le Guin's thoughts on cultural exchange. There's a quote here, this bit where Genli is trying to teach Estervan mind speech that I think perfectly encapsulates this theme of the book. Genli thinks, quote, "Since one cannot bespeak until one has been bespoken, until the telepathic potentiality has been sensitized by one clear reception, I had to get through to him first." End quote. And my interpretation here is that I think Le Guin is arguing that bridging a divide between two cultures is not easy. We have to get through to each other first, and that means overcoming preconceptions and suspicions, and all of that needs to take place before even the potential of a connection can be realized between two cultures. And there are just truly so many examples of this theme throughout the book, and I could go on for the next 45 minutes trying to lay all of them out, but I tried to focus, and I was like, Abu, limit yourself, focus. What are 3 key lessons that Le Guin is teaching us about cultural exchange? So I wanted to break down 3 lessons that I personally took away. Lesson number 1, learn to love your differences. You and I were texting just yesterday about how cool it is that we got 2 recollections of that same one night where Estervan is in Kemmer.
Yes.
And I mean, we could talk about that again for an hour, but to stay focused here, I want to just look at this quote from Genli's perception of that night. Quote, "But it was from the difference between us, not from the affinities and likenesses, but from the difference that love came. And it was itself the bridge, the only bridge across what divided us." End quote. It's a crucial moment where I think Genli and Estervan, after all of these chapters, are finally speaking the same language, where a real connection between these two finally begins. Because, to be clear, it seems like they've been miscommunicating for years. Both of them have been unable to recognize and accept the differences in their cultures and their ways of communication. And it's only now that each of them is slowly beginning to appreciate and love each other for those differences.
Right.
And I think what's striking is that in order to even get to this point, these two people have had to overcome a life and death situation. They've been placed in a scenario where they're stripped away from all society. Here's a thought from Estervan. Quote, "After all, he is no more an oddity, a sexual freak, than I am. Up here on the ice, each of us is singular, isolate. I as cut off from those like me, from my society and its rules, as he from his. There is no world full of other Githenians here to explain and support my existence. We are equals at last. Equal, alien, alone." End quote.
Ah, profound.
And my interpretation of that is that Le Guin is arguing that it is our societies, our traditions, our cultural norms that have to first be stripped away before we can come to understand and accept and ultimately love another culture, a culture that is alien to us. These things that society builds up around us are artificial structures that might not apply to a completely alien culture. And in order to even start to build that bridge with people that are not like us, we have to let go of our own baggage. And it takes being out here on the ice for each of these two people to finally let go of their individual baggage. I found that really beautiful.
So well put. Yeah, it's interesting because, of course, the first half of this book is really like a comedy of errors between these two,
Yes.
where they are just like ships in the night, totally missing each other.
Yeah.
Of course, Estervan is ultimately working in service of Genli's mission, and Genli, meanwhile, the entire time thinks he's being sabotaged.
Right.
And there's just like no ability for the two of them to see eye to eye. Their prejudices and kind of all of the baggages of their respective cultures are sort of blinders that kind of make it impossible for them to understand each other. So totally agreed.
Completely. I think Shift-Grether is a clear example. Estervan finally stops Shift-Grethering Genli, right? He's like, Genli has no idea what Shift-Grether is,
Totally.
and I need to stop trying to make it a thing.
Right.
He doesn't care.
Right.
And that's kind of finally when the walls begin to come down between these two.
Yeah.
When they let go of their own cultural baggage and kind of speak to each other with blank slates. I found that really beautiful, and I think that's a core lesson here. Okay, lesson number 2 that I took away is that you have to be willing to change. And you have to be willing to change pretty fundamentally. One of the biggest things that Genli has to do in order to successfully achieve his mission here on Gethin is to be changed. I found it really interesting that the way the Ecumen operates kind of forces their envoys to do exactly that. Envoys are sent alone when they make first contact, right? And Genli has always kind of assumed like, oh, it's so that we don't come off as threatening, right? Like you don't want to show up and be like an invasion force and scare off a new culture on first contact. That's a horrible first introduction.
Right.
But he's sort of now realizing that there's more to it. Quote, "Alone, I cannot change your world, but I can be changed by it. Alone, I must listen as well as speak." End quote.
Amazing.
That gives
What
me
a line.
chills.
Totally.
That gives me chills. That is incredible that the Ecumen has this like first contact set of rules where they send somebody knowing that this one person will be reshaped by this society. And in fact, we're going to kind of throw them into the deep end and force them to be reshaped by this society.
Right.
And I think, honestly, part of the mission parameters, part of the success is for this envoy to be reshaped. If the envoy cannot change, it's a failure. They'd probably send another envoy.
Right.
And I think the lesson here from Le Guin is that true cultural exchange requires this type of difficult evolution from both parties. Being too steadfast, being too rigid, being too stuck in your own cultural norms, like, for example, the Commensals of Argoda, or like, for example, King Argivan at the start of this book, that is always going to result in a complete breakdown of communication.
Right.
You will never be able to build that bridge between two cultures until there is an acceptance that change is required from both parties. Okay, moving on to lesson number 3. Lesson number 3 is that you have to love mankind above all. This is a line that Genli says to King Argivan at the end of the book. He's describing Estervan after his death, and it absolutely gutted me. Genli says, quote, "He loved his country very dearly, sir, but he did not serve it, or you. He served the master I serve." And then Argivan says, the Ecumen? To which Genli very calmly responds, "No, mankind." End quote.
Boom. Mic
Oh
drop.
my God.
What a line. Oh, just walks off.
What
into
a
the sunset.
line.
So good.
What a beautiful lesson here from Le Guin.
Totally.
We have loved Estervan this entire book, and he deserves to be loved, I think. Estervan is a rare breed. He was someone that loved his country dearly, but wasn't wedded to its borders. He was someone that served his country as prime minister, but wasn't loyal to the king.
All right.
And ultimately, I think he was someone that understood that no matter how alien this weird, dumb buffoon from the void is, at the end of the day, there is common ground because he is still human. He is still a person. And I think the big takeaway here is that before anything like empathy or acceptance or love, or even lesson 1 or lesson 2 that I just laid out earlier, before any of that can happen between two alien cultures, both have to recognize a fundamental truth. They have to recognize each other's humanity. There's another line earlier in these chapters where I think Genli puts it best. He's once again talking about Estervan. Quote, "For he was the only one who had entirely accepted me as a human being, who had liked me personally and given me entire personal loyalty, and who therefore had demanded of me an equal degree of recognition and acceptance." End quote.
Brilliant.
That is the very first brick that has to be laid when you are building the bridge to another culture. And all three of these lessons taken together, learning to love the differences, being willing to change, and loving mankind above all else, I think these are beautiful and powerful themes of this book, and it's a big part of what makes sci-fi so special to me. I think if more people picked up this book and synthesized these ideas, I think we'd live in a better world. Or at the very least, I think we'd at least live in a more understanding one, where more bridges are built between people.
Wow. Just so beautifully put. And I totally agree.
Okay, so that's my takeaway, and just a message of this book that deeply resonated with me and that I think I will carry for the rest of my life. You have a really excellent takeaway here as well, and I'm excited to get into it. So I'll hand the mic to you.
Yeah, and I'm. It's so fun because we write these independently, but I think our takeaways just really dovetailed and really kind of inform and complement each other. And so it's just goes to show the themes of this book are really powerful. They resonate, and you can't really not receive them if you're actually reading the book.
Yeah.
So in any case, for my deep dive, I want to really dig into this one line that really jumped out at me when I read it in chapter 18, that comes from Genli, and I just found it so fascinating that I felt we had to cover it. And it is basically when Genli, as you mentioned, was explaining to Estervan why the Ecumen sends one guy alone to a whole planet. And what he says is, quote, "It," being the Ecumen, "considers beginnings to be extremely important. beginnings and means. Its doctrine is just the reverse of the doctrine that the end justifies the means. End quote.
I love that.
Yeah, I mean, on first read, that just sounds like, okay, the Ecumen are the good guys. They don't do bad things for good reasons. Cool. Ends justify the means as consequentialism. The Ecumen rejects it. Moving on.
Yep.
But I think Le Guin is doing something a little weirder than that, a little more interesting, because right before this line, Genli says something I had to really sit with, which was, quote, "Alone, the relationship I finally make, if I make one, is not impersonal and not only political. It is individual, it is personal, it is both more and less than political, not we and they, not I and it, but I and thou." You know, and I read that line and I was kind of immediately like, I and thou, that's got to be a reference. It feels like there's something here. I have to know what this means. So obviously looked it up, and yeah, it turns out it's the title of a book by this Austrian Jewish philosopher named Martin Buber, published in 1923. And the basic idea, per Wikipedia, is that there are two fundamental ways you can relate to another being. There's I-it, where you treat the other as a thing, an object, something you use. And there's I-thou, where you encounter them as presence, like a whole being that can't be reduced. And ends justify means logic is structurally an I-it thing. The other person becomes the gobber and ice you cross to get to your goal. And the part I thought was kind of wild is that Buber's I and thou shows up in Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail.
Whoa.
King uses it directly to talk about segregation, the way segregation turns people into things.
Yeah.
And of course, MLK was assassinated in 1968. This book was published in 1969. So yeah, this is definitely part of the backdrop that Le Guin was writing against.
Right.
So when Genli says I and thou, that's not just like decoration. It's a pretty specific, meaningful reference. You know, sending one unarmed guy isn't humility. It's really commitment to a really deep philosophical outlook on how people relate to one another. There's, you know, really no way to use a planet as a means with a single envoy, which is, I think, a pretty powerful foundation upon which to build an intergalactic alliance like the Ecumen. And it basically forces the relationship between these disparate peoples into the right shape. And once I saw that, it kind of opened up the book as, you know, kind of an interesting controlled comparison of those sorts of that fundamental distinction.
Yeah.
You know, if you recall, we had Teeb burning granaries to manufacture, for the first time on Gethin, war.
Right.
Likewise, in Orgrin, you had the Sarf, who were effectively running labor camps. And we also got some of the bleakest lines from those labor camps, including the one from the guy that was essentially dying next to Genli, who said, quote, "This here is just the world. It's how it is. You get born into it, and things are as they are." End quote. Which, you know, it sounds like what people who've experienced generations of trauma and being treated as means would say.
Yeah.
And then conversely, we've got Estevan, who basically embodies the Ecumen's doctrine without ever having been told it. You know, he sacrifices his Shivgrathor, his name, eventually his life, not for some defined end, but for an honorable means. He doesn't know the ship will land. He doesn't know his name will ever be cleared. He just keeps doing the right thing in relation to this one person in front of him.
Yeah.
And that's how Genli also, of course, defends him to the king at the end. There's the quote that you brought up as well, where Argivan is asking why Estevan cheated him, and Genli says, Well, he didn't serve you, bitch. No,
He was never loyal to you.
yeah, he says, he didn't serve you. He didn't serve Karhide.
Right.
He didn't serve the Ecumen, but he served all of mankind. And then, in an aside to himself, in the next paragraph, Genli also says, quote, "It would be no less true to say that Estervan's acts had risen out of pure personal loyalty, a sense of responsibility and friendship towards one single human being, myself." End quote.
That got me too, yeah.
Which, a little narcissistic on Genli's part.
A little bit.
But I mean, that is.
But I feel like after
I
700 days together, he maybe has earned the right to think that and say that.
Exactly.
About his friends.
Exactly. That's right. And that's effectively in one sentence. That's the whole doctrine. That's I and thou.
I and thou, yeah.
And there's also a thing that Le Guin said in the author's note at the beginning of at least my copy that I think really clicks here too, which is that science fiction isn't extrapolative for her. She's not working backwards from some future end state, right? The end goal that she's pitching is not, shockingly, a unisex planet. And then this book is just, how we get there. No, she's describing in detail a world built on a different premise than ours, and she's doing it with acceptance. That's it.
I and thou.
I and thou. And that's, of course, the same kind of way we come to understand the Ecumen as well. You don't justify the present by aiming at a future. You attend to who's in front of you. This is what Estervan did. And ultimately, I think Le Guin is making a really powerful case for tolerance, for treating one another with respect and with acceptance, whether you're black, whether you're white, male, female, intersex, trans, whether you're coming from a developed capitalist state or a pre-industrial one. We are not means towards some end, but we are meaningful, sacred, and valuable in and of ourselves. That's the whole point.
Gosh. I mean, the I and thou breakdown you just did there has me thinking so much. That philosophy of I and it is, I think, sort of a default reaction, unfortunately, for a lot of people. And that's baked in culturally. Us and them, they are the enemy, they are the other, they are the danger.
Yeah.
And the Ecumen, as you're saying, sort of abides by this philosophy of we send one envoy, we commit to the I and thou, and Estervan embodies, to his last moments, embodies that philosophy, I and thou. And I think, again, Estervan is like sort of the shining example that Le Guin is laying out for us. If all people behaved and thought more like Estervan, what kind of world would we live in?
Totally.
If we all adhered to this ecumenical philosophy of I and thou as a first impression, right? First contact. We come in with an I and thou versus a us and them or a I and it. It's beautiful stuff. Wow.
Yeah. I totally agree. It's, again, this is why we love fiction. That's why we love reading these stories. That's why we love having this podcast. We get to explore philosophies that hopefully transform, us just as much as, as our boy Genli was transformed by his encounter with this alien species.
Absolutely. I certainly feel transformed by my encounter with Estervan, who I love dearly. R.I.P.
Pour one out.
Pour one out for Estervan. Oh my gosh. All right, folks. Those are our takeaways for today's episode. We've now completed our entire read-through of The Left Hand of Darkness, which means it's time to give this book a rating, to distill all of our nuanced thoughts over the last 3 episodes into a boring-ass numerical rating out of 5. Let's do it, though. This part's always fun. How would you rate this book, Obssa?
Okay, I think we can all do this together in unison.
Yeah, right? Everyone say it along with us.
This book, obviously an easy. Without a question. 5 Gobrin Ice Crossings out of 5.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, I've certainly read some critiques of the book online, and some of it, just is from kind of the time period in which it emerges. It's like a product of second wave feminism, and the people of Gethin are notably they are ambisexual, but there's not as much wrestling with gender and the kind of separation between gender and sex. And all of that is, I think, fair, legitimate criticism. But just truthfully, as a narrative work, nothing is ever perfect. We write from the context that we come out of. That all said, I absolutely adored this book. I have no personal criticisms of it. I honestly, I'm just so, profoundly, I don't know, shaken by, in adoration with the world building and just kind of the questions that Le Guin raised in this. So I don't know. I'll shut up there. Perfect. Basically a perfect book.
Yeah. I don't think it'll come as a surprise to anyone that I too am rating this book 5 meals of Gitchy Mitchy out of 5 meals of Gitchy Mitchy. Yes. I'll eat as much Gitchy Mitchy as Le Guin will feed me.
That's right.
5 out of 5. I'm giving this a perfect score. I adored this book, and I think we've praised it incessantly and nonstop. And I will continue to do so. I will recommend this book to folks for the rest of my life. And this is one of those books that I think will sit with me for the rest of my life. It has found a place in my mind. It has burrowed its way into my heart. And I will be thinking about this one for a long, long time.
Absolutely.
Wow. Well, here we are at the end of our own 700-mile journey. But, folks, we're not stepping away from Le Guin just yet.
Phew.
Because here's what we have coming up. Here's your reading assignment for the next episode. We're sticking with Le Guin for a bit longer because we're going to cover her short story that we have briefly mentioned on the podcast before, titled The Ones Who Walk Away from Omelas.
Yep.
So make sure that you find that short story online. It's all over the place. You can just Google it and just read it. It's real short. Make sure you've read that in preparation for the next episode, where we will be breaking it down with some very special guests. We are partnering up with another excellent science fiction podcast out there. We're very excited to nerd out with these co-hosts, and we hope that you're looking forward to that. So that's your reading assignment. Of course, if you're ever wondering, hey, what's coming up next? What chapters do I need to have read? When do I have to have them read by? Are you covering XYZ book? Are you covering Hyperion? All of those answers are linked in the show notes below. You can always find our reading schedule on our website, which is linked down below. So go check that out. Bookmark that schedule page. It will always be up to date with what we're reading and when we're reading it.
Well, friends, we've wondered, not for the first time, what listenership is, what the love of a podcast truly consists of. So, show us your love and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And be sure to check out the other shows on the Lore Party Podcast Network on loreparty.com. You can also follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at lore_party. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, we are equals. At last, equal, alien. Alone?
Sit with that one.
Sit with that one.